A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
The Bible says that God loves a cheerful giver. And there's a very cheerful Anglican minister from the western suburbs of Adelaide who has written a book titled The Cheerful Giver. And he's given us his time today to share a little bit about the book and also the why behind the book. And Pastor Des Smith, the senior pastor of Trinity Church, Lockleys, Adelaide, joins me now. Pastor Des, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Des, I love the title of the book. It's very positive. It's very happy. Tell me why you wrote this book.
Well, I wrote this book because I'm convinced that God calls us not just to be givers out of duty, givers because we think we might get something in exchange or we'll get in trouble if we don't, but actually cheerful givers, people who will really love to give to all sorts of things because we know how much God has given us. That's it in a nutshell. That's the elevator pitch.
Well, I like that pitch. And speaking personally for yourself now, was there a moment in your life when you got this revelation or this awareness that you had to be a more cheerful giver?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't pin it down to one particular moment. There have been moments in my life, though, I reckon, where God has really worked in that way. In fact, one of the earliest, when the importance of giving actually really struck me, happened to me when I was about 7 or 8. I actually write about it in the book. I remember I was in the supermarket with my mum, and she was looking through the shelves, and we saw a bunch of products. We saw something that we needed, and there were boxes and boxes of it. And my mum took just one or two, and I said, "Mum, why don't we just take all of them? They're on special." And she said to me, "Oh, no, we've got to leave some for the poor people." And then she moved on. And it's funny, I'm sure she has never remembered that exchange ever since, but that's actually stuck with me ever since because I thought, oh gosh, there was a great example of someone thinking about how they could actually help those more or kind of unfortunate than us and to be generous. And I reckon it's the model of my mum, my dad, and of course, as I've grown as a Christian, all the inputs that have happened to me that have actually kind of really driven home to me the importance of being generous and giving people.
Wow, that's a really good story. Isn't it amazing how, as kids, we're so impacted by events and conversations with adults, and the adults rarely remember it, but it has such a deep impression on us. And then fast forward 30 years, Des, and we're the adult in the story, and we don't remember anything we've said to the kids either. Isn't it funny how life goes in that cycle?
Yeah, exactly.
But you're the pastor of the Trinity Church in Lockleys, Adelaide. How is your church involved in the giving ministry and joyful giving?
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, like any church, we call on all of our members to give to lots of things, to give to the cause of the gospel in our local church, because we believe that we're there for the good of our community, and in particular to have our community know the good news of Jesus. And so I just love our church and how generous they are. But also, we're always trying to reach out into our community. We meet in a school, and so we try and give of our time to the school with working bees and helping them out with community stuff. We're trying to work through how we can actually get a bit more organised with helping the less fortunate in our area. We haven't quite got there yet, but there's all sorts of things we've got going on the boil there because we think it's important.
Yeah, well, it sounds like your whole congregation is giving their time and their energy, and yourself included, sacrificing a lot. It's no easy task to start a church in a school hall. I would imagine there's a lot of time spent setting up for the service and packing down after the service, and it's quite a logistical challenge, a church plant in a school hall or a rented facility, isn't it?
Yeah, look, it is. And yes, it's not very glamorous. There's a lot of setting up chairs and packing down chairs and all that kind of stuff. And yet it's actually been a wonderful time for us as a church to come together. There's nothing like doing something shoulder to shoulder for Jesus to actually bring people closer together. And people are amazingly cheerful in giving of their time and their energy in that way too. It's great to be a part of.
Yeah, it is a great team building experience. I have been involved in a couple of church plants myself, Des, and it's funny when our church, after years and years and years of doing the school hall set up, pack up thing and everyone cursing it, we finally managed to buy a building one day after years. And we sort of lost that camaraderie you're mentioning. Once we had an established building, there was no setting up anymore. it's almost like that thing left. It was kind of, it was a bit of a negative, to be honest, that we just lost that sort of, we're in it together, setting up and packing up every week.
Yeah, okay, that's fascinating.
But, well, I'm sure you're praying for that day for yourselves as well, that one day you'll be out of the school as well. But there is a joy in giving, isn't there? Are you finding that members of your congregation are also experiencing this joy?
Yeah, look, I think so. I mean, we're all a mixed bag, right? And we're all in different circumstances. And some are able to give much more financially than others. Others are able to give much more of their time, depending how God has shaped their life package. But we've got some enormously generous people. We've got some needy people, and we've had examples where those who are better off have just kind of really quietly offered to help those who are less well off in our church, kind of less well off in the community. And I just think that's just a wonderful expression of God's kindness to us and the way he's been, kind of shaping those people to look more like Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the whole world, I don't know a single nation that's doing well right now. We interview guests from all around the world, and it just feels like the whole world is under increasing financial pressure from Israel, North America, Europe, Australia, this cost of living crisis that's impacting many people. I'm in Brisbane, and I'm seeing homeless people in tents in parks and next to the river in areas I've never seen homeless people before. Are you seeing the same phenomena in Adelaide?
Yeah, I don't think we're seeing it as badly, but we're just coming out the back end of winter now, and absolutely things are getting harder for people, particularly in cold weather. People who you never thought of as being at risk of homelessness, now are people who've got jobs, and yet for some reason they just can't make it work. They can't find steady employment. And so, we're still in the very early days as a church, but gosh, we would love it if in years' time we were in a position to be able to really help the people who are really in need here financially like that. We'd love to be able to do that.
Yeah, and look, sometimes it's just sharing the gospel, like you said, and smiling and being kind and buying a coffee, or even just giving someone your time and treating them like a human being and having a conversation. There's many ways we can give, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're always saying that to people, and people are really great at that. We do think it's important to give financially to church, to charities, to the Christian poor overseas, to mission, but we also think that we need to give of our time and our talents. And I just feel like we're really blessed like that at our church. People are great.
Yeah, well, if you analyse the Good Samaritan story, I mean, the first two guys, the religious guy and the Levi, I mean, they were just busy, weren't they? They just didn't want to know about it. They probably had a meeting to go to, or they're going to go and preach a sermon or something, and it's only a Samaritan anyway. He doesn't deserve, my TLC. I got some important people to visit, and that is our modern society, isn't it? We are all so busy, aren't we, that we all have an excuse not to give of our time. But like you said, sometimes just giving our time can actually be a life-changing event in people's lives, can't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Have you got any examples of that where you've given your time to someone or someone's given their time to you and it's had a deep impact?
Yeah, look, I think so. I mean, I remember, again, a story from my childhood, which has really stuck with me. I remember my parents and we went overseas to Europe when I was 13, very blessed to do that. But it was the first time I ever saw real homelessness. And I remember being really struck by that. And so I remember as a university student being back at university in Hobart, homeless people there. And, from time to time, I would try and strike up conversations with them. A few of them I made friendships with. And I often found that, yes, they needed financial help. And there were some ways that I could help there. But actually often it was also just the time and the attention we could give them, because one of the great things they suffered from was loneliness. And they just wanted people to treat them like a human being rather than to ignore them. And so in that sense, they needed money. But one of the other good things I could give them completely for free was just my attention and time and, a little bit of love.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that affects all of us. I remember the famous actor Kevin Costner, who some of our younger audience won't know who I'm talking about, but wasn't he just living at the dream in the 90s? He had some big movies. And he said when he was a nobody actor, couldn't get gigs, couldn't get work, he was on a plane. And I think he went and said hello to a famous actor he saw in the plane in first class, just said hello to them, and went back to his seat. And this famous actor came up to him and sat next to him and just spent time with him and encouraged him and told him that, you're going to make it, just keep persevering, and really gave him that time. And he said it was a life-changing event in his life. And, of course, the rest is history. He did go on to become a successful actor, but it's just another example, isn't it? It doesn't matter who we are, like you said, or where we are or what we're doing in life. Sometimes just time with people who can have an impact on us can really be a powerful moment in people's lives and futures.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in the book, Pastor Des, what are you talking about? Are you just talking about financial giving, or are you covering all bases and talking about the time and the sacrifices? What sort of areas are you covering?
Look, it does actually primarily focus on financial giving because you just can't cover everything, particularly in a short book. And it is short. It's designed for churches to give away to their members and for people to be able to read in an hour. And so it does touch on those other things, but it does talk about financial giving. And really it just looks at why do we give? It does absolutely recognise that we can and should give in lots of ways, but this particular book is primarily focused on how we can actually give the money that God has given us to help other people.
Yeah, and there's a real battle around that area, isn't there? Particularly in the Western world, the whole, should we tithe or not tithe, or should we give to the church or not give to the church? And I think the internet has really weaponized that area. And I guess as a pastor today, that is an ongoing struggle for you, is it, to really convince people that this is a biblical principle?
Yeah, look, I mean, I'm blessed that our church haven't needed to be convinced of that, but I think it's important for every Christian to be just reminded, really, just of how good God has been to us and how much He's given us, and how that shapes our giving to others. I reckon when God says to give our money, He's not giving that instruction into a vacuum. He's giving that instruction into a war zone. My heart is a war zone. I'm constantly being drawn to worship the good things God has made, including money, rather than the God who gave them. And so that's really what the first chapter of the book looks at. Why give? Well, ultimately, it's because God has given us everything we have physically, everything we have spiritually, and therefore we give not out of obligation or duty or fear, but because we're so grateful for everything He's given us, and also because He gives us His Spirit to actually change us to be more like Him, who's a giver, and so that can't help but make us givers as well.
Yeah, and it releases joy in our life, doesn't it? Because it's more blessed to give than to receive. So it sounds like a great book, Des. How do people get their hands on this book that you've written, The Cheerful Giver?
Yeah, great. Look, it's available through all good Christian bookshops, I'm sure. I know Coorong has it on at the moment. And, of course, you can buy it yourself if you just want to get it. But also, churches, if they buy it in bulk, they actually get a massive discount. I think if you buy more than 100 copies, I think it's about $4 a pop, so it's really cheap. And so it might be that you get it because your church decides to give it to you, either because you've just joined as a new member, or maybe they're doing a series on giving and they want everyone to have something brief that they can, kind of have in their pockets. So get it through your church because they give it to you, or if you're a church pastor, give it to your people, or of course Christian bookshops, places like Coorong, all of that.
Love it. Well, Pastor Des, thank you so much for sharing a little bit of your time with us today and giving us some insights into this book. It does sound like a great book. It's called The Cheerful Giver, available on websites at all good bookstores. Just search it up on Google and you will find it, The Cheerful Giver. And Pastor Des Smith from the Trinity Church Lockleys in Adelaide, I want to thank you for joining us on 2020 Today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.